The White House has just issued a blistering response directed at political opponents following the release of internal communications written by Jeffrey Epstein that specifically named Donald Trump. According to Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, the timing of these leaks to major media outlets is far from accidental, suggesting they were strategically released to coincide with high-stakes legislative moves regarding the reopening of the government. But this isn't just about a war of words between press rooms. Behind the scenes, questions are mounting as to why officials are meeting with representatives like Lauren Boebert in what appears to be an effort to dissuade her from supporting a petition calling for the full release of these sensitive files. This raises a fundamental question about the nature of government transparency. If the administration is willing to brief members of the legislature whenever they choose, does that constitute a genuine effort to be open with the public? Or is it a controlled flow of information? Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. We are talking about an individual who spent years on the campaign trail insisting he would blow the entire Epstein case wide open. This is the same person who looked directly into the camera and promised millions of people that he would release every single document related to the case. Yet now that he is in power, his own Department of Justice is still blacking out pages, still withholding names, and still engaging in the very same tactics of secrecy that he once condemned. To truly understand why this is a massive story, we have to look beyond the surface-level drama of passenger lists and flight logs. While the names of those who traveled with Jeffrey Epstein certainly matter, the new documents reveal something far more consequential than a simple guest list. We are looking at a situation where Donald Trump reportedly personally warned authorities about Epstein's behavior decades ago. An FBI interview summary describes a call he made to the Palm Beach police chief at the time, expressing relief that they were stopping Epstein. He reportedly called Epstein a creep and claimed that people in New York were well aware of his behavior. This narrative, however, hits a major road bump when you look at statements made in 2019, where Donald Trump claimed he had no idea about the extent of the situation. This brings us to a stunning new development involving the Central Intelligence Agency. Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted predator, apparently asked the CIA to provide records proving he had an open affiliation with the agency. Let's pause and explain what an open affiliation implies in this context. Usually, when people discuss intelligence work, they think of clandestine or covert operations, the secret stuff you see in movies. An open affiliation is different. It refers to a documented, recognized relationship between an individual and a government agency. Epstein wasn't just asking if they had a file on him. He was asking for proof that he was a known entity within the American intelligence community. When Epstein's legal team filed this request under the Freedom of Information Act, commonly known as FOIA, the CIA responded with what is known as a GLOMAR response. Now, if you aren't a legal scholar or a government contractor, that term probably sounds like gibberish. To understand the gravity of this, we need to look at the details. A GLOMAR response is a specific legal maneuver where a government agency states they can neither confirm nor deny the existence of the records being requested. The term actually comes from a 1960s-era spy ship called the USNS Hughes Glomar Explorer, which the CIA used to try and recover a sunken Soviet submarine. When reporters started asking questions about it, the agency didn't want to admit they had the ship, but they couldn't lie and say they didn't. So they created this middle ground answer. In the case of Jeffrey Epstein, a GLOMAR response is not a denial. It is a very sophisticated way of saying that the very existence of the information is itself a classified secret. If Epstein had no connection to the CIA, the agency could have simply said, "We have no records." By choosing the GLOMAR route, they are essentially signaling that whatever records do exist are too sensitive to even acknowledge. Now, this is where it gets incredibly uncomfortable for the current administration. Donald Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act into law. However, reports suggest he did not want to sign it and fought against it for months. It was only after Congress pushed the bill through with overwhelming bipartisan support that he finally relented. As a result, the Department of Justice began the massive task of releasing documents, over 3.5 million pages to be exact. But let's talk about that number, 3.5 million pages. To understand the strategy here, we have to look at how transparency can actually be used as a weapon of obfuscation. This is what some investigators call a data dump. By handing the public a mountain of paper that no single human could possibly read in a lifetime, you create a scenario where the biggest bombshells are buried under millions of pages of mundane administrative filings. It is the classic needle in a haystack strategy. They can claim they are being transparent because they gave you the haystack, but they know exactly how hard it is to find the needle. Furthermore, we need to talk about redactions. In an earlier batch of 550 pages, the text wasn't just edited, it was completely blacked out. In the world of government documents, a redaction usually involves removing a name or a specific address to protect someone's privacy. But when every single word on a page is covered in black ink, that is a total blackout. This administration has yet to provide a clear explanation for why these pages are so sensitive that the public cannot see a single sentence. Here is the part that should concern every citizen, regardless of their political leanings. Donald Trump's name appears in these new documents over 1,000 times. There is evidence suggesting he flew on Epstein's private jet multiple times during the 1990s. There are even records indicating that the Department of Justice issued a subpoena to Mar-a-Lago in 2021 regarding a former employee connected to the Epstein case. To clarify, a subpoena is a high-level legal order that requires a person or an organization to produce specific evidence or testimony. It isn't a request. It's a demand backed by the power of the courts. The fact that the government was subpoenaing a private club for information related to this case tells us that the investigation was much wider and more complex than the public was led to believe. All of this directly contradicts a very specific statement Donald Trump made to the country during his campaign, where he stated, and I quote, "I was never on Epstein's plane." That statement is now facing a direct challenge from documents released by his own administration's Justice Department. This creates a massive credibility gap. Why would the government release records that contradict the head of the executive branch? And why is the administration still hiding so much while claiming to be the champion of the truth? Today, we are attempting to connect the dots that many in the mainstream media are either avoiding or overlooking. This isn't just a story about a disgraced financier anymore. This is a story about whether the most powerful government institutions in the world are actively covering up connections to a notorious criminal. Let's analyze what this specific move by Epstein implies. Why would a billionaire who was already facing intense legal scrutiny go to the CIA and the NSA asking for proof of his own affiliation? You don't do that if you are a total stranger to those agencies. You don't call the National Security Agency, the people responsible for global electronic surveillance, and ask for records about yourself unless you have a reason to believe those records contain something vital to your defense or your identity. When both the CIA and the NSA return with a GLOMAR response, they are effectively building a wall around the truth. They are telling the public that the nature of Epstein's relationship with American intelligence is a secret that outweighs the public's right to know the truth about his crimes. The chaos of this review process was even highlighted by major financial news outlets, which described the government's handling of the files as disorganized and inconsistent. We've seen instances where documents were released with redactions that made no sense, while other sensitive materials were accidentally made public. This suggests a lack of oversight or perhaps a deliberate attempt to keep the process as confusing as possible. This brings us back to the political promises. Donald Trump built a significant part of his political identity on the idea of being an outsider who would dismantle the deep state, a term used to describe the permanent bureaucracy of the government. His supporters were told that he would be the one to finally expose the powerful people involved in the Epstein scandal. But what we are seeing now is a stark departure from that promise. Instead of total exposure, we see a drip feed of information, massive redactions, and a Justice Department that seems to be playing the same game as every administration that came before it. This is causing a significant rift within the political landscape. On one side, you have critics who argue that the redactions are a clear sign of self-protection. On the other, you have supporters who are increasingly frustrated that the bombshells they were promised have not materialized. Some are even questioning the leadership within the Justice Department, wondering why more hasn't been done to clear the air. At the end of the day, the fundamental issue is trust. When a government uses national security as a blanket to cover up potential intelligence connections to a predator, it undermines the very foundation of the justice system. National security is designed to protect the collective safety of the nation, not the individual reputations of the powerful. As more documents are released under the Transparency Act, the pressure will only grow. Every new batch of papers is a test of the administration's commitment to the truth. Will they continue to hide behind black ink and Glomar responses? Or will they finally fulfill the promise to let the public see the full story? We are watching a high-stakes game of information warfare, where the prize is the truth about one of the darkest chapters in modern history. This story is far from over. With millions of pages still to be analyzed and more releases on the horizon, we are just beginning to scratch the surface of what the government has kept hidden for decades. The question remains, is the current administration truly the one to expose it all? Or are they the ones ensuring the secrets stay buried?